Our next panel is a discussion on women and non-binary experiences in cosplay, hosted by SheProp. First, we'll start with an introductory slideshow displaying our panelists in some of their favorite cosplay. Then, starting in the top left, we'll have Abbycat cosplay wearing a long baby blue wig and a striped shirt. In the top middle is Malice, cosplaying as Miss Frizzle. And on the top right is Ollie, who has a cosplay work in progress on a mannequin behind them. On the bottom left is Jen in a black tank top that has tattoos down her arms. And on the bottom right is Lacey in her Loki horns and the rest of her costume behind her. We appreciate SheProp for coming back to Geek Girl Con.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another panel by SheProp. And this is the Prop Shop Talk with SheProp, hosted by Geek Girl Con. And we are very excited to be participating in the Geek Girl Con virtual panel and con this year. This is a con that we very much love and support, so we're very glad to be here. To tell you a little bit about what SheProp is, SheProp is a growing community that is focused upon supporting, empowering, and representing female, non-binary, and transgender cosplayers, artists, and makers. You can watch these panels on SheProp YouTube channel or listen to them on the SheProp Talk podcast, available wherever you can get your podcasts. If you're interested in joining us over at the SheProp community, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we will add links to the show notes to help you find us. And we love to have you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Geek Girl Con, for hosting. To introduce our panelists, I'm Abby of Abbycat Cosplay. I've been cosplaying for about 6 years now, and I started with a cosplay for Rainbow Dash by just making a dress and wearing a wig, and that was it. And my most recent cosplay has been the Trial Witch from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, so that one's a lot of fun.
Hi, my name is Malice Vitifolk. I am a cosplayer for about 10 years, 11 years now. I started out by cosplaying my troll, Malice, who's a shaman from World of Warcraft, and I got so much positive feedback that I just kind of got suckered into it. And now I have been cosplaying with my son, who got into cosplay just last year in 2019. My favorite cosplay to date is, well, my favorite type of cosplay to date is still cosplay.
Hey, I am Jen. I go by Darth Cleavage. My very first cosplay was about 7 years ago when I decided to join the 501st Legion, and I did Bo-Katan from the Star Wars Clone Wars series. The most recent that I've actually finished is my Femme Skeletor, although I'm in the process of building the armor from the new Mandalorian series.
Hi, I'm Lacey, aka Damsel Cosplay. I've been cosplaying for 4 or 5 years. I think my first cosplay was a very casual punk winter soldier, and I wore it actually to Geek Girl Con 2015. My most recent is the Loki Agent of Asgard behind me and pictured, which is my biggest foam build to date, and it was really fun.
Hi, my name's Ollie. My cosplay name is Letless Prince, but mostly I can be found at the Cosplay Journal, which is a cosplay magazine now, to be honest. I've been cosplaying for 12 years, I think I worked out, which is far too long. My first cosplay was Riku from Final Fantasy X-2, which definitely ages me for people who know what that game is, because I'm sure that there's people who don't. And my most recent costume was Moist von Litvig from Going Postal, which is pictured there.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today to talk about SheProp and cosplay and to participate in Geek Girl Con. What I want to know from each of you is what first drew you to the SheProp community and why you participate in it. So Jen, let's start with you.
I don't really remember how I came across it. It just was kind of there one day. And after having spent a lot of time in very male-centric groups, it was really refreshing to be with a group of like-minded people. I think the biggest thing for me and my favorite part of it is what I refer to as the lack of correctile dysfunction. There's a huge tendency of people to offer unsolicited advice, regardless of, my favorite was somebody who reached out to me online and said, I don't know anything about 3D printing, but, and then like proceeded to go into an extensive dialogue of how I should have done something. And that's non-existent in this group. It's hugely supportive and just really helpful. And even when people are asking questions that have been asked multiple times, there's always a great reference to, hey, you can go here and find that, instead of talking down or assuming that someone is ignorant before, trying to help them out in some capacity.
And Ollie, what about you?
So I was invited pretty early on by a friend of mine who I think is friends with Beverly. And there was only like 100 people in the group at the time. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing. Like, even at that small number of people, it was so different and so interesting to be in a group that was, like you said, there was nobody telling you that you were doing it wrong or any of this. It was so supportive. And like at the time, I was very much in this place of like, do I even want to keep doing this? Because I was getting really bogged down in all of the drama and the random unnecessary comments and all this sort of stuff. And then SheProps came along and I was like, whoa, this is so different. It's so nice. I love it. And actually, I think that joining the community really brought back a love for the hobby that I really lost for a bit, which is great.
Well, that's good to hear. Has anybody had specific experiences where they've been helped in a way through SheProp that they may not have gotten in other groups?
I know for me, I've started with Facebook groups with the Blizzard community, or BlizzCon community specifically, and so I made a lot of friends through that. But life happens, and that group got incredibly big and started getting kind of lost in the sea, so to speak. And so when I did get invited to go join the SheProp community, it was kind of nice because even though it's grown quite a bit, you don't feel like you're at this tiny little fish in a big ocean. And it's been quite nice because you do make these posts and you actually get feedback on them, which is great. And also, I really enjoy the month, or the challenge month that we're going through right now, where we get to post the stuff, because I've actually been looking at all my stuff in the past and go, oh, I remember doing that and really liking it. And so it's been really nice to see everyone's different contributions to that.
And
I have to say,
no, go ahead.
I have to say I was really impressed by how the SheProps community dealt with when people brought up the fact that trans non-binary people were part of the group, and the use of language within the group and how it was actually dealt with so adult. Like, honestly, I've never seen a group of people be like, oh yeah, cool, I understand, let's change how we talk, without there being any argument on it. It was so impressive. And that's something I think is very different in that community as well, that there is no judgment on any of that, and people are willing to listen and understand and have discussion over just, why are you telling me off? Which is kind of common elsewhere.
That's good to hear, because that has been something that we've worked hard on, especially for mask presenting people who are trans or non-binary. I mean, it's called SheProp. It does tend to be a very feminine focused place, but it's not exclusively. So it's nice to hear that from your perspective, that was a good experience for you. And Lacey, before we move on, was there anything that you wanted to add to that topic?
No specific instances, just a general blanket. It's much less toxic than some of the other online communities that I've been a part of in the past. So I really have enjoyed just the style and baseline kind of tone that we have established in the group for engaging with each other. And it doesn't even seem to take that much work to enforce. It's just kind of like, be kind to each other, and it works.
Well, when we are cosplaying, there are things that we learn about ourselves, whether it's I like getting attention, or I like the creative process more than actually wearing something with cosplay. So how has your experience in cosplay informed yourself on your own identity and your own approach to art or the world? Has cosplay helped anybody learn more about themselves?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay, sure, great.
So for me, cosplay was my door into learning about my gender. It was my way of learning that, oh no, I'm not a girl. Oh, this is interesting. Huh, I really don't want to dress like this. I feel so much more comfortable when I'm in these costumes as opposed to this thing. And it was such a safe space to do that in because everybody was doing it, whether they were, in the LGBT community or not. They were very open to people exploring these ideas of gender. And, we even had it was so normal, there was a word for it and everything. So it's that is something incredibly special about cosplay, the fact that it is not a specifically LGBT community that allows you to explore gender and sexuality freely without forcing any labels on you or you having to know that you were even that in the first place. It gives you a window onto those ideas that I don't think any other community does, because the whole point of dressing up is that you find a different version of yourself and you might like that version better, and you might be able to go, oh hey, I feel more comfortable, I feel happier like this. And that's so special. I think that's incredibly special.
That's great. And Malice, you had something to add on that topic.
Yes, I've had a very interesting journey on that one for quite a while. This was also before LBGT became big, because I'm that old. But before the advent of the internet and how we actually communicate, and there's so many different information and terms and labels and all of that now. And retroactively, I kind of realized growing up, I might have been transgendered, but at the same time, oddly enough, because of cosplay giving me that avenue to express myself in different forms and in different ways, I've kind of come to the conclusion, whereas I might have been at one point, I don't know if it's kind of worth the effort put forth, because for now, if I do feel more masculine or if I do feel more feminine, I can just put on a cosplay and express that without actually having to change my life to revolve around it. And so it was one of those a little bit awkward for a while, because thankfully the community that I do belong to that is very LBGT friendly, they were at least open to the fact that I was questioning but then not. and so it was rather an interesting experience, because it went the opposite way that most of these stories go. But I like the fact that cosplay gave me that avenue to try out new things by the daily. Because I could go to a convention and one day be masculine and then the other day be feminine. And then when I go home, I'm just me, which is usually jeans and a t-shirt. So it just kind of worked out.
See, I really like blurring the lines in my cosplay, so I don't do anything to change my body when I cosplay, but I will have my feminine body and I'll put on chest hair or facial hair. And I really like just taking those traditional ideas of what you think of gender and just being like, no, throwing all that away. I'm going to wear what I want. I'm going to look the way I look. And I've found that to be a really great way of expressing or being the characters that I want to be, and also being myself at the same time.
The reaction from...
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Ollie.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think cosplayers don't necessarily realize how close cosplay is to drag. I think they see them as two different things, and they're not. They are very, very similar, and they definitely borrow from each other all the time. I think there's this idea of just the pageant queens and then cosplay, and they're different, but they're not. Like you said, exploring gender and ideas and creating this world where it's completely do whatever you want, experiment, explore. That's the same thing, and they're so intertwined with each other. It's fascinating to see.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, my experience particularly with my last costume, Skeletor was very interesting because I was not making sexy Skeletor. I was not trying to make femme Skeletor. I was just making Skeletor and just happened to make it in a way that fit my body and my shape, which body positivity has probably been the biggest thing for me that I've gotten from both this community and just cosplay in general. But it's always very fascinating to see other people's responses to that.
Yes, I've had very hairy cleavage, and people do laugh, and there is a aspect of that where if I'm doing a comedic character, part of it is the humor, but at the same point in time, there's an element of it where it's just like, who's to say that you can't have boobs and a hairy chest at the same time? You can. You absolutely can.
I mean, look at dwarf cosplayers. They get really super creative with the beards, even for the female characters. I love it so much.
I love female dwarf cosplays. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and like I met some really cool friends like at the Weta booth, especially like the dwarves, because it's always like these like rad. It's usually like rad women over 40 who are like my favorite, and they're just like, yeah, we have beards, dwarves. They love them. Like they're so into it and so just like happy to be expressing what they love, and it doesn't matter that like you aren't male-bodied or female-bodied. I feel this thing, like I cosplay Taco from the Adventure Zone a lot, who's described as like a lithe, ridiculous elf. I am not a lithe person. I'm very curvy, but like I will get into Taco and be like, what's up, my dudes? And like be that guy, and it doesn't matter that like I don't have that body. And I think that that outlook and philosophy in cosplay right now is so valuable, because historically when people think cosplay, they have kind of a very specific like, ooh, sexy girl in armor, like not wearing very much vision. But like in my experience, and maybe it's because I started cosplaying in the mid 2010s, has been like, express anything you want, whoever you are, whatever your body is like, it doesn't matter. And like, screw the haters who are, you know, on Instagram or whatever saying, well, you can't look like that, because everybody in the cosplay community that I am a part of is wholly supportive of expressing any facet, regardless of where you came from and how you look.
So there's this fascinating theory by pop culture historian Helen McCarthy, where basically she links cosplay back to ancient people doing the same thing with animal skulls and masks and robes and all this sort of stuff, where they would try and embody the creatures that they wanted to take power from, and it's like a magic. And by building and creating costumes and putting them on ourselves, we're trying to take elements of those characters and make them part of ourselves, and vice versa, that we're building those elements into ourselves. And that actually by doing this, we are doing the same thing that those ancient people did millennia ago, by like being like, I want to have the power of this animal. And it's a fascinating theory, and people should go and read her books. She's really interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That's a really cool parallel to draw.
It actually transitions really nicely into our next conversation topic, which is choosing characters.
Yay!
So in looking at each individual person on this panel, looking at your portfolios, the range of character types that are chosen in cosplay by this group is extremely varied. So I kind of want to know, do you have a type of character that you are attracted to that makes you want to cosplay them, or how do you choose who you cosplay?
I don't think I have a particular type or style. I have a lot of stuff from Star Wars, but that's just because that's how I got into the community. Sometimes I'll just immediately have a reaction to a character. Like right now I'm building the armor. I didn't particularly care for her or think she was anything special, but the more that I've rewatched the series and the more that I've come to, and had people say, oh, you're the armor, that's who you are, you make Mandalorians for people. So I've come to identify with that more, but honestly, a lot of it is like, I'll clean out my shop and I'll find a piece of a costume and I'm like, oh, I should probably use this for something. And then I go out trying to find something to make with that particular piece.
I do the same thing where I have a lot of stash stuff. I've been a sewer since I was 10, so I've got materials. And sometimes I'll just look and see what I have and be like, what can I make out of this? What is a character that fits? And so sometimes it's based on that. And sometimes I'll have scrap from actual characters that I've made, and I'll do different versions of them because I have all the materials left over, or a prop that can easily do a mashup version or a pinup version. So I use what I've got a lot to create characters. Does anybody else have an approach that they take?
For me, sometimes it's just looking at a material and going, I need to make this. And that's how this costume right here was created. My Mrs. Frizzle, I was at Joann's looking for something for a completely different costume. And I found this material and I just went, yep, it's space. It's fun space. It's got a little bit of colors to it, and it's got it's got all the themes of the space dress that Mrs. Frizzle has, but it was upscale. And I kind of thought about that. I'm like, well, what occasion would Mrs. Frizzle wear this dress that I was going to make? And the end result was, well, Mrs. Frizzle is most definitely a Time Lord. And she definitely has a TARDIS. That's the bus. She has her little lizard, Liz, who drives the bus, who is basically her chameleon circuit. So it completely works. And so I decided to create a Gallifreyan version of Mrs. Frizzle using this fabric. And the whole idea just was bought because I just looked at the fabric and then I need to make something with this. Otherwise, a lot of my characters are actual characters that I've been playing for years. I start out with my troll. My troll has 7 different versions of her now, and I've got another one in the works because they brought out Zandalari last year with World of Warcraft, and of course I played her as a Zandalari troll since the beginning. So now all of a sudden I got all this culture, and I'm like, I need to redo her. So I have a couple versions of her, and then the other main person who gets to choose my cosplays now is my son, who started cosplaying at the beginning of 2019. He came up to me, he says, can you make me a costume? I want to be this character. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, sure, done. And so he was Not the Brave from Critical Role. And I decided to be Caleb. So we made those 2 costumes. He had so much fun. He decided he wanted to be Scanlan. So I made a grog to go with his Scanlan. And he has a fascination with Howl's Moving Castle. And he wants to be the castle from Howl's Moving Castle.
Oh, just the castle. Whip that up real quick.
He wants to be the castle. It wouldn't be my son if it wasn't. But he decided he wanted to be the castle. And in the meantime, that is a project we're working on currently. But in the meantime, I made him Howl's jacket. And so we were Howl and Sophie at the very last convention before everything kind of closed down. So
for me, I pretty much only cosplay characters I very strongly identify with. So I have to be like, no, I see myself in this character. I see an element of myself in my character, which is so worrying that I cosplay Hux. We'll analyze that element of my personality at some point.
Come on, Hux.
In the future.
Everyone's got a little villain in them.
Yeah, no, I there's certain elements of him I'm like, yeah, okay.
Some cosplays as Umbridge. I don't want to look too deeply into that.
Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, at the moment, I mostly cosplay from books because I find that there's a lot more freedom in it, and like the characters I identify with in those books, I'm like, cool, how do I make them real? This is really exciting. And there's a lot more, I can throw myself at them and be like, what do I want this to look like? So I'm doing a lot of stuff from Discworld because I am hyperfixating on Discworld right now. So this behind me is Mort, various bits of Mort. And then I've got Moist Von Living, you saw there, Wintersmith. I'm currently making Mr. Nut from Unseen Academicals because could I get more ridiculous to make an orc who plays football? No, the answer is no. But yeah, I love those sorts of characters and finding like elements of myself in them. It's a little sad because I recently had to retire my Harry Potter costume for reasons. But, you know, that kind of thing is what I tend to go for over like, there will be characters I look at and go, I love you. I love what you look like, but I just can't bring myself to be you, which I think is, just for me. That's just my way of doing it.
Well, and part of cosplay is the play aspect of it. It's putting on the costume and being that character. And so also thinking about what will wearing this costume be like? Will I enjoy that experience? I mean, I think that's an important thing to think about.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, wearing Hux is one of the best experiences because you kind of just walk and people move.
Yes.
I mean, that might have something to do with the fact that my other half, who is 5'10" normally and 6'2" as Kylo, walking behind me is deeply terrifying, but I still feel very powerful, so it's okay.
And I have Isard, and with the 2 different colored eyes, and I'm 5'9", and I'm usually 5'11" when I'm in that costume. One of my friends told me quickly, you just, as an Imperial officer, you put your arms behind you and walk briskly, and everyone will get out of your way. They just move. It's like the parting of the Red Sea.
It's probably why I enjoyed playing Merida so much, because she's like the anti-princess. So I get to have all of the fun as a Disney princess without having to be all prim and proper. I can just be in everyone's faces and making faces at the camera. I don't have to do the whole like princess wave or anything. I can be there sticking my tongue out, or one of my favorite pictures is me and I've got this huge bite of an apple just right in my face.
Well, and I do a lot of silly characters and even villains. So like the Sheriff of Rottingham and the Ugly Stepsisters. And I found that it's so much easier to embody the character when they're silly or ridiculous. I mean, princesses are hard. You stand there, smile pretty at the camera, and hold your hands delicately. Like, once you've done that enough, like, where do you take it? Where do you go with it? Well, when you're the Ugly Stepsister, you make stupid faces and you glare at people and you flounce around and you think you're the coolest when you're not. And there's something you can grab a hold of when being that character, and it's a lot of fun. And Lacey, we haven't heard from you yet on this.
Yeah, I definitely have a type. It's obnoxious mischief boys. I have
Same.
Valid.
So like Taco, Loop, who's an obnoxious mischief girl, a Very Potter Draco. At Anime Los Angeles this year, I actually assembled a disaster squad of Lokis and I gave everyone kazoos. And that's just basically me as a cosplayer. Like, I found a Witcher and I was like, got on kazoo and I was like, da, 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 da. So like embody, like there's definitely like an element of like chaotic that I really like embodying, like, and it's something that I kind of like I was a very chaotic like child and teenager, and I kind of lost it for a little bit, and then it enables me to like grab that and play with it and just be totally free, like at a convention, as a environment where you can just go to the moon basically. And being Loki is one of my favorites, especially because I have some Thor friends and other Loki friends, because like there is that through line of like just murder mischief boy, obnoxious boy. I love him.
Oh, Malice, you talked about this a little bit about how cosplaying with your son is a big part of it, but does anyone else see the cosplaying with a partner or with a family member or a group in general as part of what leads them to choosing certain characters, or any other aspect of cosplay?
Yeah, for sure. For me, I mean, there's my spouse is not as into things as I am, but like I've played Loop from the Adventure Zone with Barry, with him. I've done Taco with Angus McDonald. Like occasionally we'll try and sync up because it's a little connection point. And doing group or couple cosplay with friends is really fun too.
I also like having having a partner that you can play off of. So I did mention the Ugly Stepsisters. You need a sister to be both of those, and having that person you can bounce your characterization off of is a lot of fun. And my partner is also not much of a cosplayer, but anytime he expresses any interest in a character at all, we'd be like, maybe I'd like to cosplay that. I'm like, oh, I'm sewing. I'm already being like, here, put this on. Like, we're doing it. And so I also like being able to bring him into my world a little bit when he expresses an interest. And Jen, you had something to add.
Oh, well, I have my boys, people always like, oh, I bet your kids have the best Halloween costumes. And it's not. And not only that, but they'll put on a costume for a short period of time and then they're done with it. So you kind of have that time investment of like, if you're really serious about this, I'm happy to do that for you. But I have not done a lot of couples cosplay, but we've done a couple of groups. And my favorite group that we did 3 years ago, Dragon Con, we were the Marriott Magic Carpet Quidditch team. And we just had so much fun with that. It was just an absolute blast. And we were each, different members of the team. I was a keeper. But it was a lot of fun. The process of putting that together was a real eye-opener, and trying to keep people happy and, mitigate some of those personality conflicts. It was an interesting experience, but definitely something I'd repeat.
As someone who does a lot of group projects, it's like herding cats, and takes a certain amount of patience to get you to the finish line on those.
I got really lucky because last year I got invited to join a group. We were doing crossovers of Doctor Who and Critical Role, and this was for Gallifrey just this year. And I was able to play Vexalia and 10th Doctor. And I had this wonderful, wonderful lady who played my River de Rolo. So she was River Song and...
Lynn? I know her.
Yes. She's a wonderful, wonderful cosplayer. Well, because of that group, we actually started playing D&D together. And we've been playing D&D for the past... We're on session 23, so it's been 23 weeks of D&D ever since that moment. And so in that respect, it was a group project for cosplay, and it ended up becoming something way, way more. In fact, my D&D character is my next cosplay that I'm working on right now. So it was kind of funny that usually it's a bunch of friends that do cosplay together. This time it was, I got invited into a group and we did cosplay, and then we became friends afterwards.
So we do need to move on to the next topic, and that is something that several of you have perspective on, and that is when cosplay stops being a fun, exciting hobby that we do for kicks and starts being something that is a business. So Lacey, in your area, cosplay commissions are a big part of the cosplay culture and the scene. So can you talk a little bit about what that culture is like and how you think that changes a cosplay experience apart from doing it yourself or making it your own, or making it yourself?
Yeah, for sure. The cosplayer that Malice just mentioned, Lynn, classy looking nerf herder, actually, I've commissioned her. She made a beautiful Arwen gown for me. It's pretty commonplace in LA because there are so many people in the film and creative industries to commission both costumes and props, whether the full thing or a piece of it. This shirt is actually by The Adventure Effect. This helm is a kit by Elegant Feather Duster. So it's very common to seek out someone who, like, if you don't have the skill to make something yourself, to be able to, like, there's just so many connections where, like seamstresses or sewists, costumers who on the side, like, because they're into cosplay, will also commission stuff. And there are plenty of instances where people almost mass produce, but like boutique mass produce certain things, like, again, these helms. And it's very accepted in LA, especially because in the region there are a lot of princess parties. So Disney cosplay is huge. And I have a couple of friends who like either own or work in the princessing industry, and will often go to conventions in those costumes as kind of a crossover. So it's supporting not only the art that people do like for themselves as cosplayers, but supporting local makers who, you know, work in the con and cosplay production areas, because there's also a lot of conventions in LA. I mean, I think there's probably 20 local cons if you include like anime and sci-fi cons. So it's a very big ecosystem, and I've commissioned quite a lot of things. I think that the big thing for me with AOA was that I made, with the exception of the coat that I had a little bit of help altering, like I made all of it, and obviously the kit. And it's a big thing also to call out, like, you know, horns by Elegant Feather Duster, shirt by The Adventure Effect. Like, it's a big like reciprocal thing where it's not only, you know, acknowledging like, hey, I had materials and support on this, but it's also like, hey, this person does great work. You should also commission them. And I've had a lot of experiences like asking around, hey, who should I commission for this? Well, this person works in this way, or their timelines are tighter, or XYZ. You'll get a better product, but it'll be a lot more expensive. So it's a very big thing. I'm happy to talk more about specifics, but that's the broad strokes.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask about that is, we can't pretend that there isn't toxic behavior in the cosplay community in some ways. And one of those ways is that if you don't make it yourself, you're not a, quote, real cosplayer, unquote. And we know that's not true. But you're talking about how in LA, commission culture is something that's widely done and accepted, but you've also cosplayed in other areas. So have you received different feedback or had a different experience when you take your commissioned cosplays into the Northwest or other parts of the country?
I think because I don't compete. So first of all, you can't enter competitions with cosplays that you haven't like made yourself typically, unless it's like a really small different con. So I don't engage with that part of cosplay at all. I don't compete. I do get a little bit more like surprised that like someone made XYZ for you, like, or that I didn't make it myself. And I'm like, yeah, I don't sew, sorry. But I wanted to look like this. I personally have not really gotten any criticism or flack for it. But I do see it online. And what I would say to it is, we're all just dressing up and having fun. So it's not really your business whether someone made it themselves or not. It's about expressing a part of yourself, and they didn't make it for you, or they didn't buy it and assemble it for you. And it's not just about creating it, it's the act of transformation. Like, I didn't make these pieces, but I do my makeup and I style my own wigs and I cut my own wigs and I paint and customize the props and things that I get. It's about wearing it and becoming. It's not about necessarily, it is for a lot of people, like the process, but cosplay itself is transforming into the character and expressing aspects of it, whether it's being in character or just being kind of in the vibe, in the zone. So there's nothing but respect from me for people who do like full armor builds, because like it's amazing and it's a huge undertaking. It's more like, for me, I see cosplay as more of the act of transformation, and whether that includes for you the process of building the entire thing or not, it still ultimately comes down to becoming.
Now, Jen, you have the opposite side of the commission perspective, because you are a person who takes and produces commissioned pieces. So
more than I make for myself too, most often.
Can you talk a little bit about how you got into that and why that's something that you've decided to take on?
It was completely by accident. I mean, there was no like, oh, I'm going to make and sell props and costumes. I built my costume, and it was the first of its kind in the Legion, and there weren't readily available pieces. So I had to take pre-existing pieces and manipulate them, or in some cases just like completely create things from scratch. And I made some mistakes along the way. So when I was done, I was like, I'm going to try to recoup some money by selling, all of my leftover stuff on eBay. And that turned into, well, you made that, can you make this? And, over 7 years, that turned into, a thriving business. But I I tend to focus more on props and the hard stuff. And I mean hard, like, physically hard, as opposed to difficult to make, because I've got people all over the world commissioning pieces from me. And my sewing skill set is still very new. I will make things for myself, but I would not feel comfortable handing off many things that I've sewn to other people just because of quality. But you don't have to worry about fitting people usually. That's actually changed quite a bit, because with the move into 3D printing, I now have a program that I can use where I can actually take people's measurements and then take 3D models and throw them into that and ensure that the pieces fit their avatars perfectly. So it's changed something that used to be, getting something one size fits all and having to tailor it to yourself, to having custom made pieces. So it's kind of different. And I remember when I started, 3D printing was not something that was readily available to pretty much anyone. And there was something of a attitude about, like, if you 3D print, it's not really making it. If you're not sculpting it or sewing it or doing it, that's not real. But that attitude has changed very quickly, especially because it's allowed people who are maybe not comfortable making things to start exploring, finishing their own pieces. Because it's, once you get the printer out of the way, it's a lot less expensive, to produce those things for yourself. I did want to point out what Lacey was saying is, whether you're making things yourself or using other people's, and I use a lot of 3D models and designs and patterns made by other people, it is vitally important to give those people credit. It's something I work very hard at, to make sure that people know. And I hate taking credit for things I don't make, which that I have the opposite side of what you have, where I'll get oh, you made that thing, that's fantastic. I'm like, no, I didn't make this. I got this piece from this person. But I do see some of the attitude occasionally about, like, well, you didn't make that yourself. And that's kind of different, because when I was coming up in my costuming organization, the attitude was like, you were somehow, it was better if you did it yourself. But as cosplay gets bigger and more people doing it more casually, being able to meet those needs is a really good thing. It's good from a business perspective too.
Well, that's great. And Ollie, you are also in the cosplay business for a career, but it's a completely different place in the cosplay business. You're a writer.
Yes.
So can you talk about how you got into writing and how cosplay played a role in that?
So I have wanted to be a writer for as long as I can remember. Literally, like, I'm one of those people. And very recently got let down by the person who made me want to be a writer. It's fine. We don't.
I wonder who you're talking about.
We don't need it. It's fine. But I kind of ended up sort of slipping into writing about cosplay because I hadn't really intended to. I'd always kind of intended to just write about pop culture, and then a publisher who I've done a bit of work with were like, we want to make a cosplay book. Do you think that's a good idea? And I was like, well, it depends on really what you want to do. And they just wanted to make a picture of photos and stuff. And I was like, no one's going to buy that. The people who are in it will buy it, and their mates, but that's kind of it. No one's going to buy it. That was done by, like, Cosplay Fever. I don't know if you guys heard about that in the States. It was a big thing in the UK. They did a book like that about 10 years ago. And at the time, it was cool because it was the only one, but I don't think it would do so well now. And so I kind of started throwing some ideas around. I was like, why don't we do this and this, and why don't we make it more of a bookazine, which is the worst word in the world, coffee table magazine kind of thing. And they were like, sure. And so I just started developing the Cosplay Journal that we have now. And it was a lot more hard work than I ever expected, and continues to be a lot more hard work. Unfortunately, we've had to leave that publisher because reasons. And now we're doing it on our own, and we're self-publishing, which is so hard. I literally spent all of last week applying for funding. But it's a very, very different thing to making and working within the cosplay community, because what essentially you're doing is promoting cosplay and having to show the best side of it, even though you might have a day where, like, oh my God, will there stop being drama? Will there stop being this? And you're like, but at the end of the day, you're like, I love this, so I'm gonna promote it as much as I can. And the biggest thing that I really wanted to do was to show how incredibly diverse cosplay was, not just in the craft, the huge amount of crafting and different art forms and stuff there were, but in the people as well. And that there's a massive change in what this is. Because I think the arts in general kind of look down on costuming hobbies. And so costuming hobbies, I would say cosplay, LARP, historical reenactment, drag, and a few others and stuff like that. They kind of look down on us because they don't see us as high art, when actually people making and creating these things are just as talented and creative and inventive. I mean, thermoplastics wouldn't have come along in the way they did. 3D printing wouldn't have come along in the way it did if it wasn't for cosplayers, and I genuinely mean that. They're so innovative, and so I spend a lot of time trying to convince people in, like, I would say the traditional cultural sector, that what we do is important, and we're saving traditional crafts as well as creating new ones, and that, you know, we are so knowledgeable about craft and history and design and all of this stuff, and you should, you know, be hiring cosplayers and LARPers and all this sort of stuff into places like in TV and film and theatre, and not just ignoring them, because I do think there's still an issue there. But when it comes to writing, I'm just so lucky. It's a couple of lucky breaks, and now I'm writing 2 books for another publisher called Pen and Sword, who are big in the UK. And because of the magazine, they headhunted me to write that. And then, you know, there's some other stuff coming off the back of that. And I've done some stuff with the BBC. We worked with the British Museum. You know, we've done huge amounts of amazing stuff off the back of it. But I will just say this one thing to make sure people don't think it's like, oh, wow, I'm going to just jump into that. It's so much hard work.
Yes.
All of these businesses, you are putting your heart and soul into it, and you're putting your life on hold to make it work, because the arts is hard. And that's not to put people off. It's just to make sure that people know what they're getting into. If you're going to do this, you know, a lot of my friends work in theatre, and at the moment there's no work, you know. I mean, we all know what's happening at the moment. And so I want people to be aware that supporting the arts is really, really important. And if your friends work in the arts, whether they're making commissions or whether they're writing plays or working in film, whatever, please go and check they're okay. Please.
Just to actually add on to that, in some respects, because I do a lot of commissioning of artwork, and some of that is to promote my cosplays. But one of the things that is really, really big is for people to realize that there's a lot of work that goes behind a lot of this art stuff, in the way of either just drawing or the writing or the cosplay pieces, because people will look at Halloween costumes and go, well, why aren't you giving me this handmade axe that you put all of this time and work in for $20? Because I can just go down to the Halloween store and
go down to the Halloween store.
Exactly. And it's like, well, then, you know, go get your base and do it yourself. And that is one of the things that kind of put me off for even trying to get into making a business through cosplay. As much as I enjoy it, it's a very expensive hobby. And I mean, yes, you can cosplay on a budget, and that's kind of what I try to do, and things like that. But you have to be honest with yourself. It's not a cheap hobby, especially when you start getting into the big elaborate costumes that people do, and they put all of this time and effort into it. And then you get people who go, oh, can I borrow that and use it for the party? It's like, no.
Yes, the deposit is $3,000.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure all of us have had somebody at work or a random family member who has absolutely no idea what goes into cosplay say to you, you should sell these, you should make them and sell them. And it's like, do you want to pay $2,500 for this? Because that's how much I would charge. That's how much, between materials and labor, that's what it would be worth for me to have any sort of margin of income from it.
My bird alone cost about $1,000 in materials, and 600 hours of work, which at my regular job would have been an easy 3,000 extra tag, just from the sheer amount of work that I put onto it.
That's actually usually my response when people ask me to buy something. I'll say, you know, I'll quote them a price and they'll give pushback. Why is it that much? And I'll say, well, it took me 40 hours to make it. how much do you make in 40 hours? And I'll ask them that, and then they really quickly stop questioning the price that I quote. But I wanted to jump on a little bit of what Ollie said, how people undervalue the crafts that go into these things. Can anyone say patriarchy? Because if you look at embroidery and sewing garments and these traditional crafts that women would do that are so artistic and gorgeous, they are labeled crafts, quote unquote crafts, whereas painting and sculpture, traditionally manly pursuits, are labeled as fine art. So there's definitely a patriarchy there. And
I wrote my dissertation on this, so this is really interesting.
So you're like, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Artisan crafts are completely underrepresented, and predominantly because they are things done by either the working class or women or people of color. And unless it's done by a white middle class or above man, it does not count as art. And I genuinely get so cross about this. Like, blacksmiths,
Okay,
full blacksmiths.
I love this topic, but we're gonna not get into it because I have a feeling if we do, we will talk for a very long time, and we're needing to wrap up. We are coming up on an hour, so I do want to take a minute to just ask all of you, when you first started in cosplay, what is the one thing that you wish you knew? If you could go back and slap some sense into little baby you, and I can start. When I first started, I did think you had to make everything, and I would make my own spanky pants that go under skirts, and I was very, I made everything. I even made my spanky pants. Nobody cares. Buy spanky pants. You can buy those. It's fine. Nobody cares. So that's the one thing that I would tell myself. Anybody else?
I think for me, I would tell myself to not worry about when I first got into cosplay, there was a lot of characters that I really, really, really wanted to do, but I didn't feel like I could pull off because I have a very awkwardly pear gourd shape body, and it makes it very difficult to find any patterns that actually work and all of that. And I think that now, since having a kid and since having such a positive reinforcement through cosplay in the communities that I have been in, it's definitely something that I kind of wish I had jumped into when I was earlier and actually jumped into the cosplays I really, really had my heart set on. And then also something that I would tell anyone is about the cosplay community is pick your communities, because there is drama out there and there is stuff that goes back and forth. And honestly,
costuming organizations.
Exactly. It's not worth your time. Don't try and fit into somewhere where you don't feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable somewhere, leave. Go find something else, because there will be a group for you. You just got to look for it. There's so many people and so many communities of different broad, types that you'll find a fit. It's not worth it to try and fit in a square peg when you're a round hole. Other way around, but yes.
Same.
Yeah.
Like, my biggest thing would be, it's absolutely okay to make mistakes. You do not have to be perfect. Your costume does not have to be perfect straight away. Like, you do not, if you screw something up, that's okay. You don't need to cry over it. And if your costume isn't finished for the convention, that's fine. You do not have to push yourself. You do not have to rush. You do not have to not sleep the night before and all this sort of stuff. And it's also okay to make mistakes as a person. Like, you don't have to be the perfect, like, cosplay person all the time and fit into all the groups and be like, oh no, I said that thing to that one person one time, they're going to hate me. If they hate you, that's on them. It doesn't matter. Like you said, the drama will happen, whatever else. And so, the mistakes in the craft, the mistakes in the community, it's okay. We're all just nerds getting along, and there's a lot of people here, so you're not going to be liked all the time, and you're also not necessarily going to be like the best cosplayer in the room at all times. Like, I think, especially when I first started, I started out with one of the groups as well, and there was a lot of pressure to be the best. Like, I remember the attitude of do it best or do it first. That's so toxic. That's so incredibly toxic.
It's terrible.
And that, I was like 16 and I was being told that. it's not good. So yeah, I would genuinely be like, you can make mistakes. You don't have to finish things. It's okay. Just, it's fine.
No one's gonna notice.
Exactly.
I would say kind of along those lines is not setting limits, not imposing limits on myself. I can't tell you how many times I didn't pursue something I really wanted to do or a character I really wanted to be because I felt like I wasn't the right size or I wouldn't do it as well as someone else or someone else had already done that. And so now I try, except within sanity reasons of reasonableness, not to set limits like that for myself. I mean, I'm still self-conscious, at times, and it's hard not to have that imposter syndrome sometimes when, especially when you're in a community of such amazing makers, to go, wow, they did it a lot better than I did. That's okay. I have people all the time who are like, I can't believe you did that. And to me, it's very simple. But then I'll look at something they did and go, but you did it that way. So I just try not to make too many comparisons or limit what I'm willing to try or do, out of some sort of fear.
For me, I think it would have been really beneficial to know that there are templates for just about everything. I freehanded AOA and Agent of Asgard, and I didn't need to. And you'll save yourself a lot of time by looking for patterns and templates when you're trying to make thing that you don't know how to make. So that would be just practically would have been very helpful for me.
Well, thank you all so much for coming and talking with us today. And thank you for Geek Girl Con for hosting this panel again. Before we wrap up, I just want everybody to go around one more time and let us know your name and where we can find you on social media. If there is something like Cosplay Journal you want to plug, you can let us know if there's anything else that we should know about you. So Malice, let's start with you.
My name is Malice Vitifolk. You can pretty much find me calling Malice Vitifolk at this point. I predominantly do World of Warcraft cosplays, and I have been running around cosplaying with my son. And pretty much when I do remember to post on social media, it's either Facebook or Instagram, both of which are under Malice Vitifolk.
Okay. And Ollie?
Littlest Prince is my handle on pretty much everything. Not that I have or use Twitter anymore, so just Instagram or TikTok, because I'm over there having a bit of a nonsense time. It's great. Love TikTok. But the Cosplay Journal is the Cosplay Journal on everything apart from Twitter, because apparently the Cosplay Journal is too long, so it's just Cosplay Journal. And our website is just thecosplayjournal.com. Really nice and easy. And what we're doing is we're creating a cosplay magazine that focuses on art, craft, and diversity in cosplay and the promotion of cosplay and the arts to everybody, and everyone can be involved. So that's what we're doing.
And Jen?
I'm Darth Cleavage. You can find me everywhere at Darth Cleavage, and my site is darthcleavage.com. My background is in education, so I try to share a lot of tutorials and that sort of thing. So and I'm happy to help. I get a lot of questions like, how did you do this thing? And I love providing that information, to people when I can. I do have a full-time job. This is my side hustle. So, I try to let people know that I can't always, spend an hour, going through details on something, but I really do love that opportunity to share. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
And Lacey?
Yeah, you can find me at Damsel Cosplay on Instagram and Facebook. I no longer have a TikTok, but I'm trying to be more active on Instagram. It's a little challenging with no conventions, but that's where I am at.
And I'm Abby of Abbycat Cosplay. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I technically have a Twitter and a TikTok, but that's basically a name only. But you can also find all of us in the SheProp community. So that is a place where you can ask questions, get help, get a whole group of amazing people to cheerlead you. So go ahead and join the SheProp community if you'd like. And of course, thank you again for Geek Girl Con for hosting the SheProp or Prop Shop Talk with the members of SheProp. And thank you very much. Bye.